Once upon a time, I was a very outgoing, bright, perky, social butterfly, talkative. Nothing really bothered me or scared me or stood in my way. Once upon a time. So up until one day when all that changed. And so I'm driving in Saskatchewan, Canada, which is in kind of central Canada. I'd been living in BC, which is Western Canada, and I was on a road trip. So we'd driven all the way halfway across the continent with this, at the time, my current boyfriend of the time. We'd been together about 2.5 years. I was desperately in love with him. Long story short, which I have to keep it fairly short, he had a panic attack while we were driving on the highway. He flipped out and he jumped out of my car while I was driving highway speeds on the highway, and the sound of his skull hitting the concrete and that sound basically kind of like, I went into shock. He didn't die, but he came close. It was this whole horrible thing. He had to be helicoptered to the nearest hospital, and it was really awful. There was so much blood, and I just remember getting out of the car and seeing him lying there on the pavement, and the blood was just pouring out of his head, and his eyes were wide open. So I thought he was dead. I went into shock. I never really came out of it. So, and how that shaped me is basically trauma, like that kind of trauma, particularly where it's just a shock event. I no longer going out to crowded places. I'm very sensitive to sounds. I'm always kind of like looking over my shoulder, wondering, what could possibly happen, because, what this kind of trauma does to a person is it takes away this sense of safety that we take for granted, where everything is fine. Now everything could change on a dime, and that's the new me.